Welcome to Neo Nexus. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon to stay updated. For generations, the United States and Canada have shared more than just the world's longest undefended border. They've shared a deep alliance built on trust and common values, but now that friendship faces its most severe test, the crisis? The Alaska Highway, the only land route connecting the lower 48 to Alaska, has been effectively severed. Canada has imposed sweeping transit restrictions on American vehicles, citing environmental protection and indigenous land rights. In Washington, these reasons are dismissed as a smokescreen for a hostile act. President Trump calls it a disgraceful blockade, accusing Canada of isolating an American state. The rhetoric is escalating, turning a regional dispute into an international showdown. The highway, once a symbol of cooperation, is now a line in the sand. Canada asserting sovereignty, the US feeling betrayed, thousands are stranded, supply chains are in chaos, and the world is watching to see if these neighbors can step back from the brink. The stakes for both nations and the continent could not be higher. To grasp today's crisis, we must revisit the Alaska Highway's origins. Built in World War II, the highway was a US military project, rushed into existence after Pearl Harbor to secure Alaska from Japanese attack. Over 1,700 miles of road were carved through wilderness in just 8 months, built by more than 10,000 soldiers, including segregated African American regiments. After the war, the US handed most of the highway to Canada, trusting in friendship. No formal treaty guaranteed American access. For 75 years that handshake deal held, based on goodwill, not law. But now, Canada is reminding the US that the highway runs through its sovereign territory. The irony is bitter. A road built for American security is now a lever of Canadian power. The lack of a binding agreement has become the fault line in today's standoff. What was once a symbol of alliance is now a tool of pressure. The past, it seems, was never as secure as both sides believed. The foundation of goodwill has crumbled, and history is repeating itself in unexpected ways. The Alaska Highway's legacy is now at the heart of a modern crisis. Ottawa's narrative is starkly different. Canadian officials insist the restrictions are about environmental protection, public safety, and, crucially, indigenous rights, not punishing America. They argue the highway's corridor is overwhelmed, threatening fragile ecosystems and local communities. The government says it has a duty to consult First Nations, whose lands were crossed without consent when the highway was built. The restrictions, they claim, create space for long overdue dialogue and reconciliation. To Americans, these sound like excuses. To many Canadians, they're legal and moral imperatives. Ottawa frames this as domestic policy, not foreign aggression. Canada is regulating its own road, on its own terms. Washington's response has been swift and furious. President Trump calls the restrictions a betrayal, framing them as an attack on American sovereignty. The administration threatens sweeping tariffs on Canadian goods unless the highway reopens. Canadian provinces retaliate. British Columbia passes tolls on US trucks. Ontario surcharges electricity exports. Yukon halts US purchases. Senator Dan Sullivan of Alaska proposes waiving the Passenger Vessel Services Act, letting cruise ships bypass Canadian ports, threatening BC's tourism industry. The cycle of threats and counter-threats has created a dangerous stalemate. US officials demand exemptions for essential travel, calling Canada's move an outrageous violation of alliance. Trust has evaporated, replaced by suspicion and open hostility. The diplomatic fallout is escalating, with both sides digging in. What began as a regulatory dispute now threatens to spiral into a full-blown trade war. The relationship is at its lowest point in decades. The Alaska Highway has become a flashpoint for national pride and economic warfare. Beyond the politics, the human cost is mounting. Thousands of Americans are stranded, truckers stuck, families separated, tourists' plans ruined. Alaska's economy is hit hard. The highway is the lifeline for perishable goods, medical supplies, and vital industry parts. The Alaska Trucking Association warns of skyrocketing costs with higher prices for everyday essentials. Small businesses in Alaska and the Yukon face mass cancellations and possible ruin. The sense of isolation in Alaska is growing as the state feels cut off by its closest neighbor. Seasonal workers can't reach jobs, families live out of RVs, uncertain when they'll move again. This is not a distant diplomatic spat, it's a crisis tearing at the fabric of daily life. The highway's closure is more than a logistical problem, it's a blow to communities on both sides. The pain is real, immediate, and growing. This crisis didn't erupt overnight. It's the result of years of growing friction and unresolved disputes simmering beneath the surface. Trade battles over dairy, lumber, and aluminum have steadily eroded trust, making negotiations tense and progress slow. Policy clashes on climate, energy, and global alliances have only widened the rift, fueling public protests and diplomatic standoffs. Trump's nationalist stance and Trudeau's multilateralism have made compromise elusive, with both sides digging in. The relationship feels transactional, not collaborative, as officials struggle to find common ground. The Alaska Highway dispute is just one symptom of a deeper diplomatic chill that now defines the border. What was once a model alliance now teeters on the edge of lasting division, with uncertainty clouding the future. As the standoff drags on, the future remains uncertain. Tensions simmer along the Alaska Highway, and both nations face a critical decision point. A negotiated de-escalation is possible. Exemptions for essential traffic, new protocols for cross-border trade, U.S. recognition of Canada's concerns, and renewed diplomatic engagement. Joint investment in infrastructure could strengthen ties and restore trust. But if pride prevails, a trade war could erupt, costing billions and reshaping Alaska's economy for years. The most dangerous outcome, a permanent fracture in U.S.-Canada relations, with mistrust on both sides and a hardened border. The world's longest undefended border could become a line of tension and division. The choices made now will define the alliance for a generation to come. The Alaska Highway is no longer just a road, it's a crossroads for the continent's future. The next move will shape North America's destiny.